Give a huge round of applause to Trevor, Clarke and Steve Baxter. Welcome, Steve, Trevor.
So hello everybody, thanks very much for joining us. If you didn't realise, I'm Trevor, that's Steve over here. We won't go into too much of background, but Steve, I wanted to start with a really quick question for you. You've been involved in multiple companies for many, many years. When you look back at what you've done, which ones do you think have had the biggest impact, either on the industries that they're involved in or for you personally?
Pipe Networks had the biggest impact on the telecommunications industry in Australia, probably since deregulation of Telstra, a deregulation of telecom of the sector. So we did a whole bunch of things there. We changed the way that wholesale services were sold. We built a lot of infrastructure, competitive infrastructure. So Pipe Networks definitely has had the biggest impact. For me personally, it would have been my first business, where I was a dial-up ISP, a lot less sexy. But that's where I got taught about business. I got taught about customer service. I got exposed to a couple of near failures, and in general, then I cut my teeth in business. Back in the late '90s in Adelaide, in that SENet, the dial-up ISP.
Do you think that you would get Pipe Networks funded by someone like yourself today?
Well, I love this question because I get to rant about something. So we didn't need to get Pipe Networks funded, I suppose. So we were a couple of founders. We threw $70,000 each into the hat, and we had some business success before, so $70,000 wasn't a huge issue for us. But we put that in as directors' loans, and we started building this company. And then we basically took it forward based on revenue from customers. So we didn't need to go to investors. When we did want to go to investors in order to accelerate that growth, we did a pre-IPO capital raising in 2004. We raised $500,000 on a $5 million valuation, and that financial year we were forecasting we reached $890,000 net profit after tax. So not this bullshit fake profit that people talk about nowadays, but tax after you've paid everything, including the tax man. Profit after you've paid everything, including the tax man. So we raised on a 5 times multiple effectively. So when you hear about some of the valuations of these young kids nowadays, you just shake your head. But would we get it funded? I hope so. Did we need it? No.
Yep. Okay. And in that time since Pipe in the early days through to where you are now, and obviously our theme is around innovation, and Todd talked a lot about that and changing the way we think. How has things changed for you from when you looked at Pipe through to today, and what stayed the same as well?
So innovation over that journey was a whole series of small incremental things. I mean, we stood on we all probably do stand on the shoulders of giants. There's researchers and people who've created things of photonics and electronics and CPUs that we basically applied a more modern business plan to. So the big innovation I think we really did at Pipe was we actually did something crazy. We actually sold customers what they wanted. We worked out what it cost and we charged more, which was a foreign concept at the time. It truly was. Aside from that, on the back end, we had a really good, scalable, productive system that allowed us to, produce revenue without massively increasing costs. And that's what scalability is about. So we use a lot of IT in the background. We use good people with amazing process and awesome systems in order to do that. So play that forward. There's a lot of different tools nowadays that you can add 2 or 3 zeros to the speeds. You can probably half the cost of most capital equipment in some respects. So, but the basics don't change. It's you got to sell something people want. You've got to make a profit, and you got to have good people and process.
Yep. And what about other components themselves? Obviously, there's a very big, and we've got a hackathon here as part of the event series itself. You're big into startups today. Are there components like that, doing hackathon approach of startup thinking within an enterprise environment that you think would work? Is that part of the new way of thinking that people need to adopt?
There is. There's a lot of innovation theatre going on in enterprise at the moment. None of it's genuine. I shouldn't say that because we benefit from it in some respects, but it's almost embarrassing to be part of.
Yep.
There's only one way you will spur an enterprise, and I'm talking about like a working, large, stable, non-startup company. Mm-hmm. There's only one way you'll actually get them to pull their head in and start to innovate, and that's you have a startup threaten their revenue. There's only one true reaction a company has, and that's the loss of revenue. So all this other crap that you get politicians saying, and Malcolm Turnbull says innovation, and we all love it all of a sudden, which is good. We had to change that narrative. But the only one true thing you can do, and you're in business, you don't really give a shit what the government does unless they're a customer. You just want to get on and actually do business right. So all the stuff they do and the policy settings, all the rest of it, you don't really care about. But if they could do one thing, which is actually to encourage more people to compete against you, that's the one truly dangerous thing that's going to get you looking up and taking notice. And it's the one thing they don't seem to do. Yeah. And it's the cheapest thing for them to do as well, right? Affecting the rate of startup formation will actually make all of our industries far more efficient, far more innovative. That's the reality.
One of the things we saw in the previous session was when Todd was doing his blind rock climbing, and he made that leap of faith, just jumping where he's on a really thin, narrow path to get to the summit itself. And you've just mentioned theatre being a big part of our talk about innovation, particularly in enterprise and elsewhere at the moment. Do we need more of that leap of faith approach to things in the Australian market today?
He leaped blindfold, did he?
He literally leaped blindfolded. I know you were outside, you didn't get to see it. The comment was, fuck dude, don't do that.
No, don't do that. Sorry, I'm more stunned about Todd. What was the question?
Do we need more people to take that leap of faith?
Oh, you do. So, and in the innovation theatre, so I fundamentally believe you actually can't teach a corporate how to innovate, unless they have a competitive threat to the revenue base. And that's so I try and leave big corporates out of it, because I've spoken to them for the last 6 years, and it's like talking to the pit of timber. So, but the thing they take notice of is when they start to lose their customers. So yes, you need to take that leap of faith. I spent a lot of time out there. I actually went and got myself a public profile and ended up getting on Shark Tank because I needed to convince more people to get into business and to be entrepreneurs. There's something inherently good about it. The hardest thing is starting. The common expression is going from 0 to 1 is the hardest thing you'll ever do. After that, you're in business. And then the hardest thing is staying focused. So you've just got to start something, otherwise nothing's ever going to happen.
I think that's a great segue, because we've got some questions that have come through on the app, and by all means, please do keep putting them in there at the moment. For a startup in the IoT space, and particularly with voice control, what are the ideal skills in the makeup of an advisory board to grow and expand the business local and overseas?
Bloody hell. So you want to hope they know something about IoT and voice control. Or not necessarily. So advisory board. Look, whether it's an advisory board or a board, the one thing is they've got to add value. So, and if you're a startup, if an advisory board or a board member is looking to charge you money, drop them like a hot potato. You do not charge money to a startup like that. You don't gouge a startup at the front end. You make money, and a lot of money, off a startup at the back end. But if you hit them with big bills and big consulting fees in the early days, you will kill them. So if this clown's looking to charge you some money, just say thank you very much, but I don't need you. But that person has to add value. So whether it's a board or advisory board, what value do they bring? And don't believe the bullshit they tell you. The people have all sorts of crap in the LinkedIn profile. Literally go and actually test them, because there's no end of people out there who claim so much and have done so little. So you need to make sure that. If they have done a lot, you have to understand, are they the appropriate person? So, and they've had a certain set of life experiences. I mean, I have young software kids come up to me and sort of, I don't know, sort of doe-eyed and, idolise, and it's like, did you realise I'm an old telco guy, if you know what I mean? So, we did a lot of software, yes. We've done, businesses grew fairly fast, but I'm not the software as a service guy, if you know what I mean. I'm the guy, if you look at my experience, I've done dial-up ISPs, I've built peer endpoints, data centres, and run fibre. And you want to talk to me about a HR startup using software as a service? I mean, just, filter my advice through that. So what I've got is probably relevant, but they just need to understand the person's journey and filter their advice through that. Because there'll be a gem in there somewhere they can take away, but they have to actually put the filters on first.
Is that the biggest mistake that most people who come to you and start talking about, hey, are you interested, is not knowing who you are and who they're pitching to?
No, probably not, no. Big mistakes when people look for investment, pitching me, is the biggest one that really pisses me off is when they say, when you give me money, I don't give money to anyone except my wife. So let me tell you,
I've got the reverse of that.
This is no gift, buddy. So the biggest mistake I see when people pitch is they don't understand the process they're entering into. You're actually selling equity in your company, and that person is going to buy it. If they refuse to buy it, they're not wrong. You are. There's something wrong with your equity or the way you've pitched it or whatever it might be that's convinced them not to buy it. So the whole Silicon Valley attitude of you must give me money and all this sort of rubbish, you have to understand what part of that sales process you're in. So there's a lot of things that piss me off when people pitch me, but I could go on all day with that one.
Yeah, so. All right. We do have another question here, which is, what are the top 3 things that investors look for before investing in a startup?
Well, I don't know about other investors, but for me, It is the person. So I've got to actually understand that the person I may be getting into business with, and when you actually invest in a company, that's in a relationship that's actually harder to sever than a marriage. So it's an exceptionally long-term thing. I've got to actually like them. I've got to actually want to spend a couple of hours a month at the very least with them to understand their business. So if I don't like the look of you, I don't like the look of you. You're ugly. No. If I don't like being around you, to be honest, I'm not going to spend time to try and understand your business and then want to meet you. You have to be sort of likeable, professionally sort of upstanding, I suppose. Then you've got to know what you're doing. I tend to invest in businesses with a bit of tech behind them, except for my Shark Tank stuff where they're mostly hula hoops and yo-yos. So something with actually a bit of, you actually in your team need the tech smarts to pull off what you're talking about. And to think that you can get some investment and buy it in is a bad start. That's a road to disaster. So it's people, but just people, it's actually their makeup, it's their skills. Then it's the problem. Really, what problem are they trying to solve? And is it big enough and bad enough that people will pay money to have solved? And in that market, is there enough room to make a profit? So that's because if it's not not making a profit, it's a charity. And it's really hard.
One of the questions there is also around what is Israel doing right when it comes to its programs. But I want to expand that a little bit more and say, to add on to that and ask, do you think startups in Australia in particular, we have too much of an Australian focus and not enough of a global focus? Yeah,
so that's dead right. So Australia, so I went to Israel about 5 years ago before it was popular on a trade mission, and blew me away. The country's done amazing things. It's got an amazing set of circumstances. All of its neighbours want to hang them from a light post. So they've got this amazing sort of social system with respect to education and military service and all that sort of stuff. So we can't hope to replicate that. They are not a nanny state. We are very much a double nanny state. So I think that people have a more risk-taking culture that's tolerated, whereas it used to be here, it no longer is, unfortunately. Australia, we are 23 million pretty affluent people. Half of Israel lives in probably technical poverty for the Middle East, I think you'll find. So it's not the case in Australia. So 23 million pretty affluent people. I was at one meeting in Israel where this guy was like VC. He was like 6'98" tall. He was massive. And everywhere I went, every day in Israel, I ran into this guy. He'd be at the coffee shop or he was in the airport lounge on the way out, and you couldn't mistake the guy because he was like Goliath. And he was a partner of a VC fund, and he said, Israel's a country of 8.4 million people and there's 7,200 tech startups. And I'm a bit of a numbers dude, and I go, that's like 1 in 1,000 people have a tech startup, right? That's bullshit. Let's just call that as it is. And put my hand up and said, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. I'm sorry, I don't believe you. And he said, no, we invest in this company who does the yellow pages for tech startups in Israel, and here they all are. I'm like, okay, I need to shut up. He goes, but that's okay. We only think 3,600 are investable. And I'm like, so if that was Australia, we have 23 million people. We would have, times that by 3. So we'd have over 20,000 tech startups. I doubt we've got 2,000 real tech startups in this country. So we are amazingly far behind in that equation. But Israel, for a bunch of reasons, they started on this journey 20 years ago, back in the late 90s, when they realised that when oranges is your biggest export, you're in trouble. So they've taken 20 years to get to where they are, probably 15 to 18 years to get to where they are. And we've only just started on that journey. So, if people are out there at the last federal election, innovation was seen as a bad thing in the electorate. We've just got to do it, because whether we like it or not, it's happening to us. We're all using Dropbox and we're all using, Airbnb and Uber and all the rest of it. None of those things actually have a direct headquarters in this country. None of those were founded here. None of the economic benefit really lands here. We're all using them. So if we think we're not participating in this innovation and disruption, we're all wrong. The thing I like to say is that, for those from Brisbane, I use this all the time, so I do apologise, but on the front, I use an Android, if I can ever get into it. On my home screen, I actually did a speech, and on the home screen, I actually added up the market capitalisation of the companies who own those icons. And it's $2.6 trillion, employing 520,000 people. Now, if that was an iPhone, that's almost $3.6 trillion and employing 650,000 people. The ASX on a good day is $1.7 trillion. That's on the front page of my Android. So people think this doesn't matter. This matters amazingly, and we are losing, and we have to start winning.
It's another good segue into one of the questions we have here around helping our kids to understand innovation a lot more as opposed to just the next shiny thing. How do we do that to encourage young entrepreneurship?
I got a mate, guy called Stephen Phelps, had a company called We Are Hunted, sold it to Twitter. It became Twitter Music, which Twitter shut down, as Twitter does. And his thing is that if you haven't got your kids an iPad, if you haven't got your kids an iPad, it's child abuse. But what you need to do with that iPad is actually teach them to create, not teach them to consume. So even if it's just creating music or videos, and there's 100 little sort of get kids programming environments out there, Scratch and whatever, you can actually start creating programs and actually doing creative things on this device. So that's a very early way to do that. Getting kids creating using these devices is a good start. But it's just something we have to do. If we're going to actually turn this around and be a nation that's more than a place that digs stuff out of the ground and we sell houses to each other, then we have to take positive changes to affect that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And there's some great programs out there. Anyone who's seen Bitsbox or the Raspberry Pi or any of those sorts of things, there's some excellent programs to look at. What would you tell your 20-year-old self is another one of the questions that we've got from here.
20-year-old self, holy shit. Jeez, I don't know.
Invest in pipe networks?
Well, I did that pretty well. It's a bit hard to take any more of the company when you first started than half of it. Look, you should have finished high school. So I didn't finish high school. So left, dropped out. My path to where I am, it wasn't conventional and probably was a harder route in some respects. Didn't finish high school. Joined the military when I was 15 years old. And what's worse than recruiting a 15-year-old? Getting them to sign a 9-year contract. So I enjoyed my time in the army, but it's not the traditional route to tech entrepreneurship, and there's probably more clearer routes than that. But hey, if you like where you are now, why would you change a single thing? You can't, because technically, if you do change anything, it's going to be different. So I get asked, what would you change a lot, and it's like, well, nothing. To be honest. Yeah.
Happy where you are.
Yeah.
And just continuing on with the idea of innovation and how we can improve it in Australia itself, another question that we've got through is what's missing in the Australian business ecosystem? Is it the capital to actually invest in some of these startups?
Yeah, look, I don't think so. I think that I don't think there's enough data to say that yet, but I think there may be. I don't think there's enough data to say that yet. I get pitched by entrepreneurs all the time, and I've had probably a good 24 or 30 over the years. Sort of, storm out of the room, slam the door, and say, "That's it. I'm going to Silicon Valley, and I'll raise the money." And fuck you, type thing as they walk out. I'm like, yeah, goodbye. I think one of those out of all those times have gone to Silicon Valley. Who has actually gone to Silicon Valley? That's 24. Have actually raised money, and it was for a business that was radically different. Now, if out of that 24, that number was, let's say, 5 or 6, then we've got a problem here. Australian investors aren't investing. These people are going over to this more capital dense environment and getting investment. So that's happening. We talk about the brain drain, that is happening, but you don't see that shift. So either we're either as smart or as clever as Silicon Valley investors, I'm not too sure. So what I think it is deal flow. Investors will invest in quality entrepreneurs every time. Back to the Israel example, 7,000 out of 8.4 million. How many do we have in Australia? Not enough. What we don't need is more investors, so that they make it. So if you think about increasing the number of investors into a poor flow of deals, all you're wanting to do is have one of them make a mistake and invest in a shitty business. That's not what we want. Like I said, remembering the equation that when you actually raise capital, you are selling equity. If the buyer doesn't buy it, the buyer isn't wrong. So if that person then goes overseas and seeks that capital, and they still don't get the investment, guess what? The buyer's still not wrong. There's something wrong with that business.
And is it typically, when you see it, one of the things that we see a lot, and even internally in a lot of organisations will have this challenge themselves, is they've got great technology people, or they've got great business people. Having those people who have those two things together in the one is really hard. Is that one of the big challenges in a lot of startups?
I think the big challenge in a lot of startups is having the appropriate tech. I'm 46 years old and I can't pick a good idea to save myself. I think that stops happening when you hit 23 years old. So, but what you can spot is a good problem, I think. A problem that's a real problem that people will actually pay to have solved. That's actually pretty universal. So when people talk about pivoting their startups, I believe the pivot should be that you actually change the idea, not the problem. So it's when you actually radically change the problem that you've actually changed the business, the problem that you're attacking. So What question am I answering again? I've lost myself.
Finding people who know both business and technology.
Yeah. So what happens is a lot of people have the idea and they don't have a technical bone in their body. They've got no desire to go out and either acquire the technical skills or to actually build a team that has those technical skills inherent. So and when I started my first business, people sort of, I was an electronics technician in the Australian Army. I used to solder resistors and I used to fix binoculars and compasses. Do you know how much computer code's inside a pair of binoculars and a compass? Not very much. So I had to go and buy these books, these things we used to make from dead trees. And I taught myself Linux and I taught myself Bash programming. And my first ISP had a billing system written entirely in Bash script. It's as grotesque as that sounds for people who know what I'm talking about. It wasn't very efficient, but by God, it worked. I don't even see the drive for people to prototype early nowadays. It's like, give me the money and I'm going to outsource this to so-and-so and they can build it. I'm like, yeah, not with my money. So...
Yep, no. So a couple of other questions we've got come through at the moment. If customer and monetary threat are the only drivers of innovation, how would you adopt or sell innovation if the company sells everything they make and by far are a leader in their field?
Company sells everything they make and by far a leader in their field. How would you adopt or sell innovation? I don't understand the question.
It's a good question.
How would you adopt or sell innovation if the company sells everything they make and by far a leader in their field? I mean, there's companies out there that do well. Big companies out there that are almost unassailable. They've typically got some sort of intellectual property, that the moat, as business people call it, that you build around the company. So, Google's an amazing example of that. The fact they've held on for so long and haven't given that up at all. But they've got an incredible piece of intellectual property that's just, just turn the handle on the cash machine. So, I suppose what we did when in both my businesses, our main competitor and bloody supplier, unfortunately, was Telstra. So we attacked niches in their market. We went through the chinks. We attacked the niches. We had a product suite that they couldn't really fully exploit because they'd cannibalised too much of their own revenue. So you can always have a crack at them.
Yep. Okay. So in some instances, innovation is not necessarily the thing; it's the business.
Well, there's technical innovation, there's business model innovation, there's so.
Yep. Okay. Another question here from Bart is, as our dependency on technology increases, the cost of losing access increases. At what point does the risk of dependency outweigh the benefits of our technology? Too much tech, that's the question.
Yeah, that's probably being played out a little bit right now with the whole fake news, sort of social media rotting our brains. So in some respects, we're losing access to I suppose a highly valued set of news. I mean, I don't read news articles posted on Facebook anymore because I'm not bothering to go to Snopes to understand if they're true or not. It literally has gone back to a network of cat pictures for me. So, I don't know. So, I don't know. I mean, I think we're seeing that played out now. But it's not like we haven't got computers wired to our brains yet. We can still function without them, albeit just more frustratingly. I'm not too sure. Okay.
Now, in the Australian market, big problems, if we're going to look at problems which we think need to be solved, what are they? That's one of the questions we've got come through.
Big problems in the Australian market. Power is one for me. I hate the fact that we're serviced in the power space by monopoly electricity companies, and I don't like anyone who believes they have a right to my revenue. I don't give a toss how power is generated. I don't care if it comes from the sun, wind, solar, gas, nuclear. I really don't give a toss. But I need more of a choice. If we are talking about actually getting away from the monopoly providers, though, it typically is a home-based technology, which is probably PV and battery. So power, there's a huge opportunity there. Healthcare, I mean, there's always an opportunity for healthcare. Unfortunately, we have our healthcare system is actually rigged on behalf of doctors who've never been told they're unintelligent. Ever since, please there's no doctors in the room, let's hope, but ever since a doctor was this high, they were told they were the smartest kid in the room, and it's probably true. And they can't listen to good advice nowadays. So they really can't change their ways, and that's a shame, because I've got healthcare startups that can save lives that are not even being trialled. So health is a massive possibility. So power, health, transportation. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're almost like we have some form of blockage of the arteries in modern cities now. They're becoming. And I complain about Brisbane, then I jumped in the cab from Sydney Airport this morning. Holy smokes! So that's ridiculous. So with all the advances happening in be it. I'm an investor in a car sharing service, but I was also one of the first investors in GoCatch, the taxi, the ride sharing service here with the taxis in Australia. Not that's gone so well either. But so transport for me. But where is the flying car? In all seriousness, we keep building roads when we can literally we have free airspace, and we're getting there. Let's just hope the Australian regulator and the nanny state doesn't choke it off, which it's so good at doing. So.
Yeah. It's not really a comforting thing though to have a flying car above your head though.
You actually someone gets killed by a pizza carrying drone.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you reckon that's going to slow down innovation until the coroner's inquest is over?
Maybe just a little bit, yeah.
So,
well, talking about the tech side of it, then what tech are you most interested in at the moment? Just as our last question before we finish off, where are you most intrigued by technology at the moment?
I really like AI, particularly in the healthcare space, and the application of technology software to health. It's not a technology issue though, unfortunately, it's an administrative issue. Really sad, the best company I've got in my portfolio, we've made about a 16 times return in a very short period of time. We have to take it to the US so we can sell it back to Australia. It's fucking ridiculous. So, to me, so it's AI in genomics, AI, genomics, healthcare in general. So there's a real intersect coming in there. Genomics because, it's giving us all sorts of insights as to what drugs work better and when and what we might be sort of prone to in the future.
Yep. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Baxter.